Kinji Hakari's luck is insane. With a fever burning up fast, spin after spin, Hakari's still willing to risk it all. Alone, he's covered some of the craziest gambles we've ever seen in some of the most intense and fast-paced performances in the series. With just one gamble, he's already won a jackpot's worth of special grade power. Hakari has proven time and time again that when he's backed into a corner, he'll bet against the odds with luck by his side. While fighting on the special grade level and even on the verge of death, with his last breath, he leaves everyone with another reason to always bet on Hakari. He's one of the strongest of Gojo students, the one strongest sorcerer in the modern era. With one of the craziest arsenals in the entire series, Hakari is just another example of special grade power only being for those who are completely different than the rest. Fighting style aside, since he might just be one of Jujutsu Kaisen's strongest punch and kick merchants, his mindset, strategy, and power is anything but standard. Even when it comes down to nothing but luck, Hakari has said before that it takes his skill and talent to capitalize for success. But even in manga, people find Hakari's gambles to be a little too unrealistic at times. He makes landing Jackpot's 1 in 239 chance look like a guaranteed power boost. Hakari's supposedly betting on a 1 in 239 chance, or in other words a 0.42% rate of success, but if anything, it's more consistent to see him landing a jackpot. If anything, there's an inductive argument that could be made that it's consistently shown in character that he will land a jackpot when rolling the dice in his domain. After landing jackpot after jackpot, it's all building on one specific pattern that some believe is just too impossible to happen naturally. But with changes to different aspects in the game, like different scenarios like chance boosters and probability changes, it's left a lot of people more than confused. Is Hakari's chance at jackpot more than it seems, or is the game itself maybe rigged? Are we supposed to believe Hakari is just flat out a lucky guy? Why is the probability of landing a jackpot less than 1%, yet we've actually never seen the game end where Hakari didn't win? Yeah, this is ridiculous. Everything I've already mentioned will be used to go into the topic of the video. Is Hakari cheating his way to jackpot, or is he just a lucky guy who's reached fortune time and time again? Will Hakari's luck run out, or is being lucky just a myth when it comes to landing a jackpot? If you would enjoy more JJK content like this, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe, because YouTube tells me that 99% of you guys who watch my videos just aren't subscribed, so please subscribe and comment on some video ideas you want to see me done down below. So when it comes to the idea that Hakari might be cheating his way to jackpot, the reasons like I've already mentioned before are pretty obvious to why people would at least think that. For those who don't know, landing a jackpot is only a 1 in 239 chance, or in other words, a 0.42% chance to occur. While Hakari could open up his domain and roll multiple times for that 1 in 239 chance, he barely really has to make any rolls before he normally lands a jackpot. Just to give you an understanding of how lucky Hakari is, if Hakari sat in his domain and rolled 100 out of the 239 times, he would only have a 41% chance at jackpot. One misconception I just want to get out the way quickly is that all of Hakari's spins in his domain will always lead him to a jackpot. Many believe that every single time we see Hakari spin, he's guaranteed a jackpot and we're just watching the cutscene in the game play out before he ends up receiving his winnings. This is just blatantly not true. Hakari has said before that it's never taken him more than 30 times to land a jackpot, implying that 1 to 29 times in a row Hakari spun for a jackpot in the past and missed every single time before he landed it on his 30th attempt. It took him 2 spins to land the jackpot we see him hit against Charles. So yeah, Hakari can definitely miss a jackpot. But even though we know it's possible that he could miss a jackpot, the rate of which he does hit jackpots every single time that we know he's ever landed one were always still extremely low. Even that time where it took Hakari 30 spins to hit jackpot, where he went 29 spins with absolutely nothing, giving Hakari a guaranteed 30 spins each time he would roll for jackpot only makes his chances about 12%. So even on his bad days, Hakari is still just supposedly this really lucky guy. So just to be clear, yes, Hakari could miss a jackpot. Although he's not raising the probability to 100% of the time, that doesn't mean that he's not raising the probability at all with things that have to do completely outside of the rules of the game. If Hakari were to be influencing his luck in some way, that would be considered probability manipulation. Like the name implies, it would be the ability to alter probability, allowing one to make the unlikely more likely to occur and vice versa. Now, what many don't really consider is that probability manipulation has been a thing in JJK. Out of every character to be our blatant example for probability manipulation, it's actually Haruta, by far one of the most boring and just overall lamest character in the entire series. His technique works by storing everyday small miracles, like observing a clock being at 4:44 p.m, and then it's immediately erased from the sorcerer's mind. As long as he's got these miracles stored up, whenever Haruta does find himself in danger, the accumulated miracles will expend, and it can get him out of any problem he currently finds himself facing. It's an ability that works completely on its own and completely passive, and Haruta probably doesn't even know much about it. The point of what I'm trying to say is that we've already already seen a curse technique that can interact with luck before and even change the probability or certain outcomes of any problem. As for Hakari, there are ways to raise the probability inside of the domain to land the jackpot, which do stand within the rules of the game, so it's clearly not cheating. For example, whenever Hakari does play the game, different Richie scenarios can actually foreshadow the rate that he's got for hitting another jackpot. There are also like actual chance boosters in the game. For example, different backgrounds and even group indicators can sometimes guarantee an upcoming jackpot. It's kinda like seeing a Potara fusion or 5 Saiyan pods before a multi-summon in Dokkan Battle. Dokkan Battle, please sponsor me. Hakari also gets different effects after the actual jackpot, and when jackpot mode ends, he can enter one of 2 modes. Both modes can be decided depending on Hakari's last roll. The first is increased probability or probability change mode. If Hakari had rolled an odd number at his last attempt at jackpot, just like the name implies, it increases his chance for another jackpot. When he is in increased probability mode, Hakari's chance at landing a jackpot becomes so high that Kashima wasn't even willing to take the chance to let him expand Idle Death Gamble one more time just to even attempt to land a jackpot, which is then when he decided to discharge all of his cursed energy in an all or nothing attempt to make sure Hakari would never be able to open up his domain again. The second mode Hakari could enter is faster spins or time reduction mode. If the last time Hakari spun for jackpot he landed on an even number, the speed of which he can now roll and play the game is going to greatly increase. The faster Hakari can spin in the domain, the greater the decrease in the number of chances remaining to hit a jackpot. But at the same time, if Hakari does end up hitting an unexpected jackpot during faster spins mode, it's going to ensure that he goes into the next round with increased probability at the end. There's also a third mode called hidden probability. This is when Hakari, and I'm literally not making this up, has a plus 75% chance of increased probability to roll a jackpot in faster spins mode even though he never entered increased probability mode in the first place. To be fair, it's not really as bullshit as it seems. In pachinko machines, the game of which Hakari's domain is completely based around, there is a mode that appears similar to faster spins but actually does carry increased probability. It's a clear part and aspect to the pachinko game, and it's usually part of the result of hitting one initial very difficult jackpot but then leading to a string of consecutive jackpots after the initially hard one. The mode itself in pachinko is called fever mode, and if you know anything about Hakari, you know he literally lives by the fever. I'll talk more about Hakari's fever and mindset and how they can even be possibly playing a role into how he's landing all these jackpots, but first, I really want to focus on this mode I just mentioned. When Hakari goes up against Kashima, which is really when most people begin to point out the idea that maybe Hakari's game is just rigged to begin with, all of his one spin and hit jackpots might be easily explainable thanks to this mode. When it's revealed that Hakari entered hidden probability mode, which is known in pachinko as fever mode, it typically occurs after one hard jackpot to land actually makes it through, which is then when the player is rewarded with multiple consecutive jackpots. If you remember back to Hakari's second fight on screen against Charles, he actually ended up missing his first attempt at landing jackpot. When the first scenario played, it completely depended on the main character Yuki passing through the ticket gate in order for Hakari to land a jackpot. And obviously, as we all know, Yuki never made it through the ticket gate. Of course, on Hakari's second spin, he does end up landing that jackpot that we see him use against Kashimo, but it took that one initially very difficult spin to land. It's possible that the initially difficult spin to land against Charles is what caused the consecutive spins that we see later, which would also fit the criteria of fever mode and hidden probability mode. Now there's also Hakari's fever, which is basically the philosophy he lives and fights by, which can also be playing a massive part in how Hakari is able to land all these jackpots. Hakari explains to Yuji that he loves people's fever. The fever is the feeling of risk that's going to come with any high stakes gamble, where you could potentially lose something valuable, but in return possibly gain something even greater. Hakari gives the example of both somebody getting scammed and the scammer. While both of these people are on two completely opposing sides of a situation, they both have a fever deriving from the idea of wanting to change their own life. Hakari says that people simply get away with their fever and they end up making bad decisions. But while that's completely true, without the fever, people wouldn't even be able to fall in love. According to Hakari, there's a more direct way to deal with the fever, and he tells Yuji it's through gambling. But unlike most normal people, Hakari views life itself as a gamble. Hakari says that he's never met anybody who's just wanted a peaceful life without any gambling or risk. Gambling on winning and betting on your own success to win is a clear part to being a strong sorcerer. Time and time again, we've seen sorcerers given the decision to bet on their own power, and it's a decision that can either make or break even special grades. It's a concept that could be found all throughout Jujutsu Kaisen, but it's best explained through Gojo in chapter 58 when Megami's knocked out by the finger bear and Megami ends up thinking back to the training that he received after the Goodwill event. Gojo sees Megami's potential and skill as probably higher than Yuji's, but the only thing that separates them is the mental aspect. Gojo tells Megami that he just doesn't really know how to bring out his best self, or at least in the way that Yuji does. Gojo's not saying Megumi hasn't been trying his best, he's just saying he doesn't really know how. Using the baseball game as an example, he asked Megumi why did he choose to bunt the ball when they were playing baseball. Gojo says he sacrificed himself and his opportunity to bat, all because he wanted Nobara to advance. Well, that's good for Megumi. People like Gojo and Yuji will always be swinging for the fences. Gojo's saying that if he was put in that exact situation, he would never take the choice to bunt when he has the opportunity to potentially hit the ball and land a home run. Gojo's not even saying that a sacrifice bunt was a bad choice. Baseball at the end of the day is always going to be a team sport where each member is expected to play their own role. But Gojo says when it comes down to being a sorcerer, it's completely different. Unlike baseball, being a Jujutsu sorcerer always has and always will be an individual sport. While Gojo does agree with Megumi that coordinating with allies is definitely important, according to Gojo, no matter how many allies you have around you, you will always die alone. Gojo tells Megumi that what he's been doing is underestimating himself and others around him. What he needs to do instead is envision a stronger version of himself that can overcome the challenges that he's facing. Gojo tells him this to teach him what it's like to visualize winning, and it's exactly what Megumi tries to practice in his battle against Toji Zenin in Shibuya. When sorcerers visualize winning and bet on themselves and their own ability to win, that's when they end up growing to greater heights and performing the impossible. Megumi, for example, ended up visualizing himself overcoming the challenge of opening up his domain, and for the first time, we end up seeing Chimera Shadow Garden. In Shibuya, when Gojo's forced to make a choice between his own morality and getting the job done as the strongest, when he's backed into a corner where Gojo for the first time can't even really rely on his limitless curse technique, Gojo decided anyway to gamble on his own ability to win and decided to literally bet on himself like it says on the page by expanding a domain expansion for only 0.2 seconds. With some parts of Gojo's plan not even really being decided until the very last second, or they straight up came down to intuition, Gojo decided to roll the dice anyways and bet on himself and his own ability to win. Both Megumi, Gojo, and Hakari all participated in the same thing. Every single one of them was burning up with the fever. They're all rewarded for betting on themselves and they all overcome the challenges that they face, but out of any sorcerer in the series, Hakari is the person who takes this to an extreme. When Hakari goes up against Urame owns up to the fact that they've been misjudging Hakari from the very start. Urame says that the sorcerers within the modern era have this intense obsession with remaining human. They so desperately want to hold on to their humanity, constantly telling themselves to hold back from destroying the very thing that would be so easily crushed with their now overwhelming power. Urame says that it's the fear of being alone that makes them weak. Even Satoru Gojo, Hakari's teacher and the one strongest sorcerer in the modern era, not even he is immune to the loneliness that comes with having immense power. When Gojo's speaking to Geto in the afterlife, he tells Geto that he's no stranger to feeling isolated. Gojo says that there was always a gulf between him and everyone else around, even if they adored him. He gives Geto the analogy that even if you can admire a flower and help it bloom, you can't ask it to understand you. It's one of the reasons why despite how hard Gojo worked the month before, he was never going to reach Sukuna. But when it comes to Hakari, this all really isn't too relevant. Hakari doesn't fear being alone, and he doesn't have any of the problems that relate to being human that have held so many back in the past. For Hakari, his entire life is just one big gamble. Hakari lives his life and fights another day, all in the name of burning up a hotter fever. He lives for the thrill, risk, and even the anxiety that comes with betting it all on yourself and betting on your own success as the only way to real victory. Hakari literally lives for the gambles and the opportunities to bet it all in the name of success in the way that can either make or break special grades on a daily basis. Both Hakari's mindset, strategy, and fighting style and overall power is all correlated and comes down to his fever. It's a simple and known principle in Jujutsu Kaisen, betting on yourself against the odds and envisioning your own success and throwing it all away in the name of victory is the only way to true power. Just like Gojo and Megumi, whose fevers burned hotter than ever when they chose to bet on themselves and their own ability to win, Hakari is by no means an exception. It's always going to be safer to win once and walk away at any table at a casino, but by taking your winnings and betting even more than you ever could, you'll experience a higher fever. It's being on a roll that will continuously bring Hakari more and more jackpots. The feeling of risking it all to overcome the problems in front of you, the feeling of burning up with a fever, the test that comes down to either making or breaking special grades. As long as Hakari keeps embracing the fever, the path to true power that's known all throughout Jujutsu Kaisen, he will keep landing jackpots. There's a reason why the hidden probability mode, the mode in Pachinko that will have you consecutively hitting jackpots back to back, only happens after the first initial very difficult jackpot to pull off. When Hakari had opened up his domain against Charles, there's nothing certain about the gamble that he was about to take. When Charles thinks he's won, he flat out tells Hakari that if it was a game of skill, he might have actually pulled something off. When it came to fighting outside the domain, Hakari clearly had control for most of the interaction. Hakari was blitzing Charles, even though he was then tagged and Charles says that he can now see where he goes 2 whole seconds into the future. I don't think it would have made a difference, especially considering that Charles thinks that if it was a game of skill and not luck, Hakari still might have pulled something off. Hakari opened up his domain against Charles despite not really needing to, all just because he saw it as another opportunity for him to gamble. He has that first really difficult spin to land before he enters fever mode, where all of his following jackpots happen consecutively. He doesn't need to cheat his way to jackpot because he knows how to play the game. Hakari takes the rule for sorcerers betting on themselves and applies it to everything about his life. Hakari's curse technique comes by default with his domain expansion. There isn't really much functionality when it comes to any other aspect to his technique aside from idle death gamble. Hakari really doesn't have any other way to gamble. Every time he fights, it's another chance to roll the dice. Hakari's just a lucky guy who knows how the world works. Don't hate on the player, hate on the game, because if anybody knows how to play it, it's gonna be Kenji Hakari. And it's exactly what Hakari means when he tells Charles that it's about using his skill to capitalize on his luck.